Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily.
going.
And I'm just watching what you're doing on
Don't
screen, and I'm
watch
like,
what I'm doing.
and it's a great night to be here. To be honest, I think it is raining outside, and that's always a great night to stay in and talk about fishing. So,
Yeah.
With that, we have had actually some good luck as we've been out recently. And the nice thing is, Josh was so kind. He had actually Friday afternoon off, and so he came. He picked me up from work, and he brought me out to the lake right after work, because if we leave right when I get done, we can still make it to the lake with enough time to go fishing. And so that's what happened. And the nice thing about that is last Friday the heat had not quite settled in yet, and so what we were able to do, I guess, is really enjoy our time outdoors. There was really just enough wind to keep the bugs off of us. Like we said, the heat had not totally pushed in yet, and we did all right.
Yeah, we did all right. And I think I was laughing when you were saying, like, oh, we have just enough time to go fishing. Enough time to go fishing for us is about 5 or 6 hours. That's why I had to laugh. But no, it was a good time. We really cherish those really nice days, and it wasn't super windy. It wasn't super hot. We were fishing pre-front fish. Although we didn't catch as many fish as we thought, we did catch some quality fish, and they were starting to be in spots where we were expecting them. And so just things kind of culminated into the nice summertime pattern like we were hoping. And it was nice. Nice start to the weekend.
And I guess I'm going to ask you this like a question, but it's not even guiding for a conversation. It's like a legit question, because I forgot, like, what were we using as bait? Because I feel like I switched my bait like 12,000 times before. What did we land on? Was it a leech pattern? I think that's what I used.
Well, so I think the biggest thing to bring up here was the color pink was really hitting home for you. I think you had a few different body styles that you went through, which lended you to catching different species of fish on the same color. I actually stuck with the new the new bugger from Woolly Bugger bait, jig bait from Widowmaker in a natural color. There was some bugs flying around, some bugs hatching, and so I just kind of stuck with that. I could have switched over to pink, and I may have switched over to shimmer jig later, like a pink and white later, like way late in the day. But no, I just held on to that natural pattern, and I caught a few, and it just seemed like you just did better with pink all day. So pink's one of my favorite colors. I really do believe that's if nothing else is working, throw something pink on in a size range that's acceptable, even a little bit smaller than you think, and you'll get something to bite, whether it's bass or bluegills or walleyes or anything. Everything eats pink. It's amazing.
Well, and full disclosure to the people at home, it's not hot pink and it's not bubblegum pink. What we're using is like almost a clear tone plastic. It was very light tone, but it's mostly glitter. It's glitter tones of pink.
It's a me special. Unicorn get glitter princess.
But it is just mostly a glittery pink bait. And so if you're looking for something similar, I honestly imagine that it exists. Yep. So keep your eye out. And I think honestly in winter, especially on that lake, the bubblegum tones do really work. So sometimes people balk at having pink baits, but they do great. And this time of the year, we were crushing it. And so I will admit, I had a great evening. I got nice bluegills, nice crappies, and it's not every outing that you do so awesome, right? But I think summer pattern's coming up, and that's when the fish are really out biting. I don't know. I'm excited. It's all coming up, and so I can't wait for it. So I guess the only thing that we didn't talk about yet is water temperatures. Friday when we went out, we were shocked to see almost very consistent temperatures, 75 plus degrees. And I heard a few other people that were fishing the area that were finding similar and even higher water temperatures, which blows my mind. After that, we had a very hot weekend. So I imagine that those water temperatures stayed consistent, if not rose a little bit. But since then, early in this work week, we have had rain, rain, rain. So at least where we are, I have heard that they have started going back down a little bit, but I don't actually have an up-to-date report more than that. So I'm excited to get out there. I'm excited to see where they're at. And I think with water temperatures having hit such a high temperature, fish, when I say that, panfish, bluegills, crappies, they pushed in, they've done the majority of their spawning, and they're pushing back out to those patterns that we're expecting for summer.
Well, and for all of you weekend warriors excited for next weekend, because next Friday is 4th of July, just keep an eye on next week's weather, because for at least for central Wisconsin, it looks like it's going to be consistent, and that means good fishing. So get out there, get some bobbers in the water, or baits. Probably baits. Bobbers don't catch many fish. Baits catch fish.
Well, and hopefully your bobber is going down,
Yeah.
and hopefully your boat is not.
Yep.
But I guess with that, in case it is, that is why we have our guest on this evening, and for a whole bunch of other reasons, right? But let's bring him on to the show. So, John, thanks so much for being here. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be on here with you guys. So my name's John Hartz. I live just south of Portland, Maine, and an avid boater. Have a 100-ton captain's license, and am a seaplane pilot. I spend a lot of time on the water, both recreationally and fishing. Some great striper fishing up here on the ocean in Maine, and then inland we have a wonderful native brook trout population. We also have landlocked salmon, some pretty big pike. So whether the lakes are frozen or thawed, there's plenty of fishing to go around up here too.
And this is so exciting because, to be honest, this is our first night meeting you as well. So we contacted you not even honestly knowing that you were such a fisherman. So this is all kinds of perks going on here tonight, right? But tell us a little bit about Paddle Pump, because that's how we found you.
Sure. Yeah. So me and my business partner designed a product called the Paddle Pump. It's just like it sounds. It's a combination bilge pump and a paddle. I have a 16-foot Carolina skiff, and there's no battery system on it or anything. It's just got an outboard tiller, and anytime I go down to it, it's full of rainwater. And so Paddle Pump's kind of a perfect product for that, where I don't have to carry a separate bilge pump and a separate paddle. I just have one that can do both. Anytime the engine dies or if I'm shoving off ashore, I have a paddle. But then it's also able to pump out the bilge when I need it to. The pump's up to 5 gallons a minute. One every 10 strokes is a gallon. And I have one here. This is black. We carry green, yellow, black, working on some other colors. So we're making the blades and handles out of recycled plastics, and the shaft is anodized aluminum. Extends all the way up to 60 inches and collapses down to 36. So it's kind of your perfect, backup paddle tool. It's not really designed to be, you're not going to canoe the Allagash or canoe for days with it. But if you need something, sitting in the bottom of your boat that's there just in case, it's kind of the perfect tool. And we're making them here in Maine. My business partner is a game warden, or used to be a game warden, retired game warden for the state. And so it was really his brainchild, and I helped design some of the internal valves and, trying to start a marketing effort to get it out there. We're just bootstrapping
it. That's awesome. And so when you talk about it being a bilge, it's not actually automatic, but it is kind of that pump action like you showed us. So can you maybe show us like how it works? Because I know I've seen you actually, how I first saw you is a Facebook ad. And I will admit, I thought that this was like, I don't know, one of those crazy online things that you run into or whatever. Because I was like, oh, that's cool. But it probably comes from who knows where, you wonder if it's a scam, but it's not. And this is a really cool product. And that's why you're here to show this.
Thank you. Yeah, I can try to stand up here and maybe get it in frame. But so there's a hole here on the bottom of the paddle. There's a couple internal valves that are all rubber components. There's no metal. There's no real moving parts. The only moving part is this collet here. So you just loosen the top, and that allows you to extend the paddle. There's a hole here at the top of the handle, and that's where the water comes out. I don't have a bucket of water here with me, but when you pump like this, the water comes in the bottom and out the top of the handle. It's fully serviceable. You can undo this collet and take the paddle apart. So if you need to clean it, you can do so. But we designed it where, every bilge has got a little bit of grit and grime in it, sand, etc. This will handle that no problem. And if you need to clean it, you can do so. And then it's fully adjustable. So the same collet, you can tighten in any position, any length, and then, it's a paddle and doesn't collapse. So it's a pretty cool tool. We're really excited about it. I mean, most of the comments we get are, how has no one thought of this before? Because it's so basic, right? I mean, the only difference between this and a regular paddle is that it has a couple valves in it. But most of your aluminum paddles are still just a hollow tube, so this is really no different.
Well, and what I love about this is, Emily mentioned before, this is not anything electronic, but that's probably the best part about this product is that no matter in an emergency situation, even if you do have electronics, I'm not sure you want to be running electronic stuff when your boat is full of water. And so this is a perfect tool where you can get that water out quickly in an emergency situation. Also, if you lose power and you need to get your boat somewhere like to shore or somewhere, to another boat, then this will also help in that instance. So it's doing double duty that way.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's so great to talk to people that actually know boating and know fishing, because I can't tell you the amount of keyboard warriors I get on Facebook being like, well, how are you going to pump and paddle at the same time? And, well, it's just wild. But before this, my skiff had a little, plastic paddle in the bottom of it, and it had a, Jabsco bilge pump, and, I have both of them anyway. So this just makes my deck a little cleaner and my boat a little tidier. So it's been great, and the feedback for people that know boating has been really positive. But there's plenty of keyboard warriors out there too.
Oh my gosh, that is actually really funny that people would say that. I guess if you're not familiar with a boat or have never had a boat filled with water, but I mean, like you were saying to begin with, it's not even an emergency situation. Let's say that you're just docked at the pier, you didn't have a bilge pump on, your battery died, whatever it is, you have water in your boat, that's not necessarily, hopefully, an emergency, right? But you can get out there and still have this be ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, the use cases are not just what I'm doing in a skiff. I used to work at a yacht club as a captain, and they had a fleet of sailboats that were out on moorings. And, same thing. After every rainstorm, there'd be 6 inches of water sitting in the bilge, and none of those have electric systems. They're all just, 13-foot dinghy sailboats. And so every single one of them, especially in a sailboat, when the wind dies, you need a paddle. So they all have paddles on them, and they all have pumps on them so that they can keep the bilge dry. Meanwhile, I duck hunt as well, and you got waders, you got dogs coming in, you're picking up your gear. You end up with water in the boat no matter how you cut it, and you got to get it out. So, every boater or fisherman or duck hunter knows, that they probably have a paddle or a pump and a paddle on board. So we're trying to service that industry. One of our products is OD Green, for the specific purpose of trying to keep it, low vis for duck hunters. And then we have a bright yellow one with the idea being, hey, this is your emergency paddle. If something happens, it's one more thing to be able to wave around at the boat next to you, or the Coast Guard, or whoever else.
That's awesome. And there's a couple other things that you mentioned earlier too, is that one, it's collapsible. So that really, like right now we have a full length paddle in one of our storage compartments, and having something that would be half of the size.
Well, and hold on. I think that's a really important point, though, because it's not just that it's collapsible, but because I was going to ask about, if it's an adjustable length for people who are tall or people who are short. And so I was concerned that it would only work as a paddle if it was like collapsed all the way down. But you were showing that you could adjust it to whatever length that you want it to be.
Yeah, it's fully adjustable. There's no notches in it. It's just that collet tightens in any position that you're looking for. So, like I said, down to 36 inches is the shortest it will go, and it extends all the way to 60 inches. And we have, this is Rev 6, I suppose. But, the early versions we had some problems with, when you undo it, there's a stop line that tries to, prevent people from overextending it. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera, on my camera. But so the early versions, we just had that, and people would, sort of disregard it, extend it too much, and then the paddle had a weak point there. So now we've, made sure that we've left, a good 4 or 5 inches of tube in the shaft here, so that you really have no risk of over flexing it. And that way it's a reliable paddle. I don't know if you guys have tried, I don't want to name any names, but there's a lot of really kind of like cheap foreign paddles out there that you can buy for, $20, $30. I can't tell you how many of those I've, snapped on the first or second row when I'm like trying to get a boat to the mooring, a sailboat to the mooring. And, we built
Well,
this to do seaplanes, and that was actually the inspiration. So, like, as I mentioned before, my partner used to be a game warden for the state. He flew float planes for the state. And it took him to come up with the idea. And the reason being was, on float planes, part of every single pre-flight is pumping out your floats. So floats have all these different bulkheads and compartments in them, and you're checking to make sure that there's no water. If there is water, then you have a leak. You're carrying extra weight. Not necessarily a good thing. So that's part of every pre-flight. And then you have a paddle on board, because planes, while they can take off and fly and everything else, they don't have brakes and they don't have reverse. So if you're coming into a shoreline, or if you have to cut your engine, now you're just a floating weather vane. And so you really have to have a paddle to be able to push off or paddle out to safer water. And so, both of those are essential tools, and that was the inspiration for it all.
Okay, and so then is this like a situation where you would get this and then it would be, like your backup paddle and like a tool in case there's water, or is this strong enough to be like your primary kayak if you are, in an aircraft or in a kayak or something like that?
Sure. So for an aircraft, absolutely, this is the only paddle I carry on my aircraft. You're using it few and far between. Certainly, it's strong enough. Again, if you're paddling, we have a famous waterway here called the Allagash Waterway. I don't know how long of a stretch of water it is. It's probably a couple 100 miles, and people take, 7 days to 2 weeks to paddle it. And this is not the most efficient paddle to do that with. But having it as a backup, as every, canoer that's doing that type of thing should have a backup paddle, this would be a perfect backup, because one, it replaces your bilge pump, and two, you have your nice, whatever, $1,000 carbon fiber paddle to do the long journey with. But this, is there in case, that breaks or you lose it overboard or whatever else. For things like, my John boat, the skiff I have, yeah, same thing. I'm typically using the outboard. The paddle I'm using when I'm getting really skinny in skinny water, or if, the engine dies or something like that. So sort of using it few and far between, plenty strong enough to handle that situation, but you're not going to find it's the most efficient paddle design. It's mostly focused on being the backup bilge pump paddle combo.
Yeah, and a tool that's perfect to have.
Yeah,
I
thank
cut
you.
you off. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't really have anything else to add.
I cut you off before. Did we cover what else you were gonna say?
Well, no, I was just saying that I really enjoy the fact that it's collapsible, and like, we have a full size, full length paddle, probably one of the cheap ones you mentioned. So I'm glad that that's probably going to break next time we go to use it. But we have that in there, but freeing up a lot of that room with something that's collapsible is awesome. But the other thing that I want people to realize is that right at the beginning you mentioned that you can take it apart and you can clean it. And so I think that was really ingenious between you and your partner to think of that, not only for a performance thing, but for keeping invasives down, because you're bilging out lake water, you're transferring that piece of equipment from body of water to body of water, and having something that you can easily clean out, and it you can keep it clean, and you won't be transferring that stuff. That's really cool.
Yeah, we've actually, to that point, we've experimented with some adapters to put on the end. Nothing that we've officially released here yet, but filters, so that, for seaplane operations specifically in Canada, you have to collect your water. So it's almost like, why am I even pumping it out of my floats to just put it in a bucket to put in the back of the plane if I have to bring it with me. But if you put a filter on it, then you can put it back in the water. You're filtering out the invasives. We have the same problem here in Maine, probably that you do, where we don't want milfoil transferring from pond to pond. Invasive species of plants and fish are huge, and I think we all need to do our part to make sure that we keep our waterways clean. And to that end, the new paddles that we're making now, originally we're making sourcing our plastic with just recycled plastics. Our latest version is actually using recycled fish nets. So this is fish nets that fishermen used commercially, and they're incentivized to discard them, and they get paid for them, and then we can melt that down and turn it into the plastic that goes right back into our paddles.
That's awesome.
That is actually really awesome, because I was going to ask about that, because you mentioned that they were recycled, or at least in part. And I think that it's really cool that also you said that, they were made here in the US. And I think that's, really important to people. And so to have all of those different qualities, I think that is part of what makes a great product, to be honest.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, my partner, who is the retired game warden, he is putting every single one of these together in his hangar in Rockland, Maine.
That's awesome. So, do you guys have any personal emergency experiences where you've used this, or do you guys have you gotten any stories from customers that have been like, man, I purchased one and holy cow, I'm so glad that I had it?
I don't know if there's been like a huge life-saving moment by any means. We've only been around for a handful of years. I'd say we've probably got 1,000 out there in circulation, maybe. For me personally, just having a paddle is most important than anything else. I mean, if your boat's really sinking, this can go a very long way. Like I said, 5 gallons a minute, but that only goes so far, and I guess that's the time where we have to make a choice of paddling or pumping. But just having a spare paddle on board and something that's easy to grab, and we sell kits so that it just can be stowed away on the side of the gunnel. If your engine dies, or if you hit a rock, or the way my dock is set up, it's at low tide. I mean, I got to pull the boat up on the hard, and so I have to pull the paddle out every time in order to get to my dock practically.
Yeah. I think of a specific instance where we could have probably used one. We were rushing. People that listen to this channel have heard this story a million times, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, because it happens. But we were rushing to get our boat launch, first launch of the season,
After
and
season, yep.
And
I know where this is going.
You forget your little things, your
checklist.
Yeah, your checklist. You really kind of forget it, and you're rushing. And I think for me, I don't, this might not be such a big deal for you, but I saw the golden parking spot, right? Like somebody had pulled out because they were, really, and it was launch. And the launch was completely full, and there was one, the golden parking spot in the front. I'm had my eye on it, and so I'm rushing, get that spot, get back to the boat.
Launched. Yeah.
We get halfway down the river, and then there's water on the floor, and Emily's like, why is there water on the floor? And I'm like, I don't know. No. And so then I reached my hand down, and I didn't at the time, I didn't have an extra plug in the boat, because the plug is in the truck.
Oh boy.
Since then, I've carabinered the plug to the keys to the boat, so I can never have the keys and not the plug. But that would have been an instance, because we had to live.
I mean, that's a story as old as time. So many people, you're not alone there. I'm guilty of that too, where launch a boat, and fortunately, you don't make it very far typically before you realize the plug's out.
Oh my. Oh my gosh. So I know that in our comment section, we put a link to the website. So for people who are listening and they want to check that out, that's going to be really easy to click on. If people are listening as far as a podcast, they're going to have to just go and Google it themselves, right? Paddlepumps.com. But I have to ask, and maybe this is a hard question, but is there anything that we have not brought up yet about this awesome product?
I think we've covered pretty much everything. I really appreciate the time and you guys allowing me to come on here. I'm super excited to be able to bring this product to the market. Super excited that's made here in the US. and hoping everyone thinks it's as smart of an idea as I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Okay,
sure
but
do.
don't sum up that fast because hold on one second. I still do have a few questions for you.
Sure. Lay it on
Because
me.
while you're here, I mean, you are currently our connection all the way over to the East Coast, right? And I think that this is one of the times of the year where people are really truly planning like trips and vacations and excursions of all kinds. And I know that Maine is a beautiful and wonderful place to fish. So you mentioned a little bit about fishing and possibly guiding. Can you give us some tips or some hints, or how has fishing been for you?
I'm definitely not a guide, so we can dispel that rumor, and any good fisherman doesn't give up their spots, but
Yeah.
but no. So I just summarize the fishing in Maine. There's some phenomenal. If anyone here is a fly fisherman or fly fisher woman, there's really great fly fishing here in Maine, both still water and flat water for brook trout and landlocked salmon. And that you'll find in central Maine and Greenville or Rangeley Lakes region. And then down here on the coast, we have a run this time of year of some really great striped bass, or if someone's from the mid-Atlantic, they call them rockfish. And this time of year, we'll see some in the 40 to 46-inch range. In another month, there'll be more or less schoolies in the 19 to 22 range. And then you can go offshore and go for bluefin tuna. So the world's really your oyster up here in New England.
And you can go and eat oysters, I've heard.
You can. Yeah, you can do that too. And then let me just turn my iPad around here. We
I was
got
going to say, you
phenomenal
have the most
sunsets
beautiful
as well.
background of the season.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Maine's pretty green. There's I'm going to butcher the statistic, but we have the Great North Maine Woods, which is, I think, something like 3 million acres of. It's all privately owned by logging companies, but it's all accessible to the public. Any pond in Maine over 8 acres is open to the public, as long as you can access it over, not using someone's backyard. So we have great laws here in Maine for access to the outdoors, and a lot of room for adventure.
That's awesome.
That is actually awesome. And if you ever decide to fly over to Wisconsin, you hit us up because we'll do some fishing here. But for people at home who are interested in the paddle pumps, I do also have to ask, do you do any kind of social media or like Facebook besides advertising?
Yeah, not too much. I'm not as good about it as I should be, but you can find us at, I think it's, paddlepumps.com is our website. And if you look at paddle pumps, I think CO or paddle pumps on Instagram and Facebook, you'll find us. And then hoping to do, more stuff like this, get the name out.
Cool.
That's awesome.
And hopefully we can at some point convince you to come down to our Wisconsin fishing expos, because that is a whole bunch of fun. Yeah, like awesome. I didn't prepare you for that.
All right. Well, I have to learn more about that.
But we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and talk all about this, because I think this is a really unique and really awesome product, and great for well, I was going to say for Christmas, because nobody has this as a gift. If you're looking for that fisherman who has everything, or birthdays, we're pretty far from Christmas, but that's why I hesitated. But that's what I thought.
Christmas in July, man.
Yeah, I'd say Father's Day is usually the go-to. And I think we are probably running a promo right now. So I think if you use Up a Creek when you're buying a paddle as a promo code, I think you get 10% off.
Oh, awesome.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. And thanks so much for being here. And
of
we
course.
Really appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And to everybody at home, hopefully you guys are out fishing and catching fish and having a great time, because it is that time of the year. We will be out this coming weekend, and we can't wait to bring you all the updated information on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.